Hi, I'm Dr. Joyce Alberts, clinical psychologist working in private practice based in New Zealand. I've been following the Lindsay Clancy trial, which is underway in Massachusetts, United States of America. I've posted quite a few videos and clips around this particular trial, as it's captured not only my own attention, but a lot of attention, not just in the United States of America, but apparently now spreading around the world. My intention of putting videos such as this onto YouTube is to raise questions, ask questions, share information, maybe make people more aware and more attuned to issues such as postpartum depression and what mothers may experience in the 1 to 2 years post childbirth. So just a quick update on where the trial is. Today is Friday in New Zealand. So in the United States, this morning it was Thursday for them. And the defence is getting close to the end of presenting its case in chief. So I understand that there will be one or two more witnesses called by the defence. Then, if the defence rests, then the prosecution has the opportunity of presenting what's called a rebuttal. And they apparently have lined up a number of expert witnesses to discuss what they're presenting to the jury, which is that Lindsay Clancy did not make a serious attempt to end her own life. She was not undergoing a break from reality. She was not experiencing postpartum psychosis, that this was a deliberate and intentional act, and therefore she should be found guilty of ending the life of her children. So this case, apparently, listening to different people discussing it, has caused quite a divide, not dissimilar to the Karen Read case. There seems to be those that strongly hold to the point of view that they believe the evidence points directly to Lindsay Clancy being guilty intentionally of taking the lives of her 3 children. There are those that passionately and vehemently suggest Lindsay Clancy did not do this at all. In fact, she may have been convinced by her ex-husband, Patrick, that she did do it because she was so unwell, whereas they're claiming that the reality is that he, in fact, is the perpetrator of this crime. Listening to many lawyers who've been following this case and looking at evidence, including documentation that's not available to someone like myself or available to us here in New Zealand, many of these very well experienced lawyers are just putting that aside and just saying that's just ridiculous. There's just no evidence. And in fact, it's causing quite a degree of distress for, as you can imagine, for Patrick Clancy and his current wife. Then there are those that are saying, well, the evidence is very clear that Lindsay Clancy was experiencing severe postpartum depression by September of 2022, began seeking medical help, was prescribed multiple medications, a total of 13 different medications, and different combinations of those medications within roughly a 4-month period, and that the evidence points to that she should not be found criminally responsible for this, and that she, in fact, is suffering a significant mental health issue, which is postpartum psychosis. So the other day during evidence, and this is the defence presenting its evidence, it came out that the Massachusetts General Hospital has been conducting research and has what they call the postpartum psychosis project. Now, I'm going to share this website because I think this is a really useful and informative website if people are interested to read more about postpartum psychosis. So, at one point, at least one point, Lindsay Clancy herself presented to the Massachusetts General Hospital's emergency department due to concerns that she was unwell and that she was seeking help. So that sort of caught my eye and made me think too, well, if they're doing this project and they're gathering this data and apparently beginning to publish articles, how was it that in the ED, knowing that this was a mother whose youngest child was roughly about 3, 4 months old at the time, she'd had previous experiences of anxiety and low mood, and that she was having difficulty sleeping, she was losing weight, she was highly anxious. So it was surprising to me that in the ED department that this wasn't flagged. Now, apparently it was recommended for her to do an inpatient hospitalization at that time, but Lindsay and her husband, then husband Patrick, declined that apparently. And others have speculated that the rationale for declining inpatient treatment at that time was due to the fact of the logistics of looking after 3 very young children. So at the time they had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and as I said, a 3 to 4 month old. So this is the website. Welcome to the Postpartum Psychosis Project. This outlines the difference between what is commonly experienced, and many women will tell you, I myself had experienced this, in particular with my last child, just 1 or 2 days of what's referred to as the baby blues. But one out of two, so 1 or 2 out of every 10 women will experience postpartum depression after delivery. So that's more prolonged than baby blues. That's not just 1 or 2 days, that's at least 2 weeks. That is part of the diagnostic criteria for diagnosing depression or a depressive episode, is that those symptoms need to be present most of the time, most days, and at least for 2 weeks. So those symptoms include low mood, sleep and appetite changes, fatigue, hopelessness, concentration problems, anxiety, as well as others. So there could be increased motor activity, like feeling fidgety or agitated. And it does appear, and it's been confusing to find accurate mention of this, but it was suggested in evidence that shortly after the birth of her last child, Lindsay actually participated in a 5 kilometre run. She was very much into fitness and health, and some have suggested, in fact, the psychologist who presented that evidence in his testimony for the defence suggested that that may have been evidence of heightened mood, mania, etc. So postpartum psychosis is less common and more severe than postpartum depression, and typically starts in the first few days or weeks after giving birth, with mood changes including depression, mania, or a mixture of the two, before progressing to psychosis. So while this says in the first days or weeks, I want to take you to one of the accounts. So I've just scrolled down, and this is one of the stories of a woman who's participated in this study. And you will see that this is going to be Kate's story. And you will see and read in her story that her symptom presentation was many months afterwards. So Katie explains that she was overjoyed when she found out she was pregnant, and she And the daughter that she gave birth to instantly became the light of my life, and that has never changed despite the mental struggles I endured after having her. So this caught my eye as her statement. Once she hit the 3-month postpartum mark, things drastically changed. So while initially, yes, she had complications, she had to physically recover after the birth, but mentally she felt great. She for those first 3 months, she was not experiencing baby blues or postpartum depression. However, at the 3-month mark, listen to this, she was planning to go back to work. She went back to work, and at the same time, she decreased pumping and breastfeeding. Now, this was the stage that Lindsay Clancy herself was at when she was seeking help. She was due to return to work after having taken maternity leave. She was highly concerned that her youngest would not take the bottle, even though she was pumping breast milk, and she was looking at weaning her youngest off breastfeeding and to enable her to return to work. And this was causing a great deal of anxiety for Lindsay. So at that same time for Katie, so this is, remember, the 3-month postpartum period, not the first few days, not the first few weeks. Everything seems to be hunky-dory. And then her symptoms began and would continue on for months. She had strange beliefs, delusions, visual and auditory hallucinations, compulsions, intrusive thoughts, and panic attacks every single day. And what jumps out at me is that the similarity between what Katie describes and what Lindsay Clancy herself repeatedly told clinicians in those months leading up to the tragic events of January 24th, 2022. So some interesting stories there, very, very heartfelt stories that these women have shared. And again, interesting that the Massachusetts General Hospital is undertaking this research project, gathering data, and put up a website where we can read this information. And again, just the question I have continues to be, that given this knowledge and given this information, how was this missed? Now, you might be wondering, why am I wearing this bright pink top? So today is, as I said, is Friday in New Zealand, but today is also Thursday in the United States. And I'm going to explain why I chose to wear this pink top today, and I've been wearing it all day. And that is because increasingly in the United States, but also around the world, women are becoming really concerned about what we're hearing around a trial such as this, around what Lindsay Clancy has experienced. And some are arguing she's not the victim here, it's the children, and I don't disagree. The children certainly are the victims here. But I could see an argument for both sides, that Lindsay Clancy herself is the victim, as well, of course, as her husband and extended family. But can also say, yes, she's not. We need to keep focused on the children. But a movement is starting to swell up in the United States where women have now gone to the courthouse in Massachusetts where the trial is being held. And you can see video clips of this. I understand if you were to look up Fox News, for example, or other news stations in the United States who put information on the website, but also on YouTube. There was quite a large number. I understand it was in the hundreds. And women are wearing pink tops to show that we're concerned. It's not saying we support Lindsay or we support what she has done. It is an indication of saying we are concerned, and as a group, we're wearing the colour pink as a message to others to say we're really concerned about women's mental health and the way this is being treated. I was listening to attorney Melanie Little this morning, and she was talking about an illness that her father experienced, and how this illness, which is a horrific illness, and there is no treatment for that, but how that a lot of research has been done, and there's a lot of understanding of how this illness affects mainly men. The majority of people who experience that illness are men. And she was comparing this to the lack of understanding and the lack of research and even the lack of clinical understanding around women's mental health, around what happens for women as they, young girls, as they start their menstrual cycle, moving, into things such as endometriosis, moving towards pregnancy, postpartum periods, and also up to menopause, and how women's health through that combination of hormones is impacted, and there's a lack of understanding. So I'm wearing pink today because, again, I have questions and I've got concerns. But now I'm going to share another video clip, and this is from Martin, who hosts Brother Counsel. So he also is an attorney, a practicing attorney in the United States, and he has given me permission to share clips from his video. So I'm going to start off with this one because he really explains the critical question that's before the jury in this trial. To assist them, they either have to say, yes, the evidence beyond reasonable doubt proves A or B. So let me go to share screen. But he's going to go back to, and this was a clip I was trying to find the other day and muddled my way through, but he's going to go back to and explain why it was that the attorney Shannon for the prosecution acted so inappropriately. But let me just start this clip. I'm not going to play his whole episode here. You can see it's 30 minutes and 11 seconds, but I just want to play the beginning portions of this.
Which the jury is going to have to answer in Lindsay Clancy's trial is, did Lindsay Clancy suffer from a serious mental disease or defect which caused her to lack the substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct according to the law? Now, that exact question was asked today in Lindsay Clancy's trial of an expert named Dr. Zeisel. And I'm going to play for you that question and that answer. But before we do, there's some other very interesting clips that I want to play for you and talk about that happened yesterday and today. Now, yesterday, we had Susan Clancy on the stand. Susan Clancy is actually Patrick Clancy's mother.
So this is Martin's, Brother Counsel's video from yesterday. So yesterday being Wednesday, Thursday for us in New Zealand, so Wednesday, the United States, and he's referencing what happened on Tuesday in the United States. And what you're going to see, and I think I've shown some of this, is the cross-examination of the prosecution of Lindsay Clancy's ex-mother-in-law, the mother of her, the father of the children, Patrick. Now, as Brother Counsel's just explained, Susan Clancy was called by the defence. So bear that in mind. This is the paternal grandmother who's lost three beautiful little children, and she is giving evidence on behalf of Lindsay.
Now, what's so interesting in this case, such an interesting dynamic in this case, is that Patrick Clancy, the father of these three children who were brutally murdered, actually seems to be on the side of Lindsay Clancy. When he testified, he seemed to be on her side. And the same thing happened with Susan Clancy when she was on the stand. She was saying, this is a witness that was called by the defense. So these are her 3 grandchildren that were murdered by Lindsay Clancy. And now she is testifying basically on behalf of Lindsay Clancy that she was begging for help and talking about what she was going through. So that actually led to a question by the prosecutor, an incredibly inappropriate question. The prosecutor has got to know that it's inappropriate. And this is not just the level of, maybe I can get away with this type of question. This is like mistrial level type of question.
Right. So, Brother Counsel, as I said, a practicing attorney in the United States, and is very clearly explaining that the question the prosecutor, Shannon Buckingham, I understand her name is, the one who wears the bows in her hair, the question she's about to put to Susan Clancy is inappropriate, should not be asked. And in fact, many of the attorneys who post on what's referred to as LawTube are just going off about this, that this is grounds for a mistrial with prejudice, which means the trial should stop, it should all just finish, and they can't come back and have another go at Lindsay. That's how egregious this question is. That hasn't happened. A mistrial has not been declared, but at the very least, that is going to be part of an appeal, is what I understand.
And the prosecutor's got to know better than that. And she asked the question. Now listen to what happens. So let's play it for you. Let's get this up. And there's some other clips also I want to play from yesterday, which really answered a lot of questions that you may have on this trial. And I think important questions that we were talking about that need to be asked in this trial. But first, let's take it one step at a time. So this is Sue Clancy, Patrick Clancy's mom, and listen to this question.
Now, are you an active member in the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So you're aware that murder is considered a mortal sin?
Counsel, can I see you over here? Okay. Are you an active member of the Catholic Church, and do you realize that murder is a mortal sin under the...
So, Brother Counsel is about to explain why that question should not ever be asked during a trial.
Catholic Church guidelines, that is so wildly inappropriate, a question that you cannot ask. And she asked it. And the judge himself, actually, there's no objection yet. The judge himself realized this and right away said, I want to see counsel at sidebar. Because he...
Right. So he explains that this question should not be asked because a person's faith has nothing to do with the criminal act. And in this case, she's asking, the question is put to, not to Lindsay, it's put to Lindsay's ex-mother-in-law. Now, I'm just going to scroll ahead here because I want to get to the point where he talks about the ultimate question. And I'm just going to pause my video for a minute because I want to make sure I get the accurate place and not ramble on and on and on. Right, I'm just going to switch to the other screen again and carry on. I found the exact place I was looking for. Hopefully I'm getting more efficient at doing this. As I said, I'm not a professional. I am a clinical psychologist.
So now let's get to the ultimate question. I mean, this is literally the ultimate question that the jury is going to have to answer. And this was asked to Dr. Zeisel. Let's see what he says, because this is the exact question that the jury is going to have to answer.
So can you tell this jury, sir, in your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty based upon all of what you have reviewed, all of what we have talked about, all of what you have considered as to whether or not at the time of this incident resulting in the killing of these 3 little kids that she was suffering from a mental disease or defect such as that she lost substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of her act, or in the disjunctive, was unable to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law.
Yes.
Tell the jury what your opinion is, please.
My opinion is that she did have indeed a mental disease or a defect. That's a legal construct, not a DSM-5 one, but she had bipolar disorder with postpartum psychoses. In addition, she was unable to conform her behaviors to the rule of law, and she had no appreciation for the wrongfulness of her act.
There you have it. So that is Dr. Paul Zeisel, a clinical and forensic psychologist, and he is asked at the end of his evidence or his testimony in court by the defense attorney the ultimate question: was Lindsay Clancy experiencing mental illness to the degree that she should not be held criminally responsible for her actions? He explains that in his assessment of Lindsay, and he assessed her almost immediately after the tragedy, and he has provided diagnosis of bipolar with mania and postpartum psychosis. That is his clinical opinion, and he explains how he comes to that diagnosis. So that question has now been answered by an expert for the defense, and the jury have heard this. Whereas for the prosecution, what they're hearing is questions about, were you aware that Lindsay Clancy has said things about her mother-in-law, her ex-mother-in-law, suggesting that she really didn't get on well with her. So they're sort of asking questions that are sort of going around this issue. They went to a lot of effort and lots of lengthy questioning, taking up a lot of time around trying to present to the jury an argument that Lindsay did not dive headfirst out of a second-story window. She, in fact, slid down the side of the house. She was hanging on, they claim she was hanging on to the windowsill of the second-story bedroom and then slid to the ground, which doesn't make sense because her spinal cord was completely transected. So the break is going all the way through the spinal cord. And in fact, the experts for the defense have explained that this type of spinal injury and where it is located, the damage in the cervical spine as well as the thoracic spine, is of such significance that you will see this in injuries where, for example, someone's dived into a swimming pool and they've hit their head, they've gone headfirst into the concrete swimming pool and thus paralyzed themselves. So that question seems to now to be answered, at least by the defense. It's going to be up to the jury as to what weight they put on the answer provided by Dr. Zeisel. They may accept it, they may dismiss it. And I'm just watching that. I just froze there. That was weird. A little bit of a freeze. So again, the questions. I have so many questions, and I'm wondering if anyone else does have questions. Obviously, what will the jury ultimately decide? Will they be able to come to a decision? Has the prosecution, and will the prosecution be able to present sufficient evidence to convince the jury beyond reasonable doubt? Or will there just be a split in the jury, and that will result in a hung trial or a hung jury, so that this will have to be repeated? Or will they, because of some of the antics of the prosecutors, as have been suggested by other lawyers, possibly lead the jury just to be so annoyed with the prosecutors that they decide we're going to find her not guilty? You know, the way you've been so dismissive and rude to multiple witnesses unnecessarily. and especially treating, if you look at the cross-examination of Patrick, not the cross-examination, I beg your pardon, because Patrick Clancy was called by the prosecution. So his direct testimony, and then the cross-examination of Lindsay's own mother, as well as her ex-mother-in-law. No time did the prosecution show any empathy for Patrick or for the mother-in-law or Lindsay's mother. There was no expression of really sorry for your loss, really sorry that you had to come here today to give evidence. No, there was nothing. It's just been cold. And okay, they're professionals and they're doing their job. But I've seen many, many other trials where the prosecutor or the defense prosecutor will stand up and say, look, I'm really sorry for your loss. I have no further questions. Because questioning the relative who was not present, who was not in any way participating in this, what value was it? And yet the prosecution cross-examined Sue Clancy in detail. In some areas it was, you might say it was relevant, but I was left with the question, what did that add to assisting the jury in arriving at a decision one way or the other than almost at the end of it, you got scolded by the judge who calls you over immediately and potentially could have caused a mistrial. The whole case could have been dismissed just through that one question. So again, this all comes down to questions. I don't have the answers for all of them. I'm continuing to ask questions and try to find information. And I hope that my intention of posting these videos is that may raise awareness of the issue of postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis and help potentially prevent tragedies like this occurring in the future. So for now, I'm finished. I've got questions, and I hope you've got questions too. Ka kite.